the local church is the hope of the world. Not because the church itself is anything special, but because it is God's chosen vehicle to display His love to the world. And when the church lives out that message of hope and love and chooses to follow Christ's call every day, then the city really can be filled with the life, the message, and the fame of Jesus. When Rigby and Sue Wallace said yes to planting Common Ground in 1997, they were saying yes to loving God and His people alongside the 50 or so others He had added to their community. How could they know how much God was going to use that simple yes to further His mission in Cape Town? God's ask has always been simple: love Him first and then love others. In saying yes to following this mandate, Common Ground put their roots down in Cape Town and said yes to what God was already doing, growing in His love and letting that pour out through His church communities to the people around us. Over the first decade of Common Ground, God was planting seeds of love and generosity deep within us by His grace and wisdom, and preparing us for things we couldn't even begin to imagine. We said yes to discipling young lives through our Year of Your Life program. And so the field team was birthed, leading to many young lives impacted through ministry into Cape Town schools. And today, many of these field teamers have gone on to serve and lead ministries and plant congregations. A small group of people with a heart for compassion and justice put their hands up to start the Friends First Foundation, that in 2008 became what is now known as Common Good. And we said our small yes to fighting for compassion and justice within the context of our city. God prompted us not to wait for people to come to us, but to say yes to going to them. We didn't even fully comprehend what this meant. But when a group of Common Grounders said yes to the call of God to take the blessings that God had sown in Common Ground Bosch AM and plant a small community of people in the inner city, we started getting our first glimpse. The best gift we can give the city of Cape Town is more Christ followers, and the best way to multiply Christ followers is to plant more churches to reach more people. It quickly became evident that God was calling us to take His message of love and fame deeper and wider in the city. And soon another small group of people put their hands up to God's call to go plant a third community in Constantiaberg, while also planting an evening community more dedicated to discipling and evangelizing the student and young adult community in the Rondebosch area. 2008 had seen terrible xenophobic attacks erupt across South Africa, and this seemed to catalyze God's community across the country into mobilizing to respond. While we may have thought it was just a momentary opportunity to say yes to loving God's people in our spheres, God clearly had grander and more loving ideas. Over this time of xenophobia, a community grew and a small group was launched under the care of Andre Ntambwe. This then launched our network branch of Common Good, helping individuals become ready for and find employment. It was out of this move of God that Andre and Sabrina said a further yes to God's prompting to lead this community into becoming what is now our Wynberg congregation. Meanwhile, across other sections of our family, God was stirring in the Constantiaberg community to launch a new congregation in the South Peninsula. All the way across in the northern suburbs, a 10-year-old community planted in Durbanville called Generations Church said yes to an orchestration of a merger within Common Ground. And a new congregation was birthed out of two shared histories to serve the suburb of Durbanville and beyond. As our congregations multiplied, so did their desire to say yes to even more compassion and justice and cultural renewal. Various of our congregations launched literacy and numeracy programs in schools needing extra assistance, warm-up winter campaigns to get clothing to those needing them, and Live Under the Line campaigns to create awareness among people about the realities facing our neighbors. All throughout these different stories, God was leading Common Good to help disciple Common Grounders to live more justly and together respond to the social giants within Cape Town and show His heart for the poor and vulnerable. God led them through rigorous, life-giving research in 2014 to strategically focus all initiatives on the Triple E strategy, addressing early life, employment, and education more intentionally. This birthed great community moments of rallying towards these opportunities through campaigns that raised over R1 million over 3 years. Bosch AM and PM in the meanwhile were also feeling the call towards the suburb of Tableview. And when God opened doors and called Roger and Nikki to say their yes to launching a new community, the Common Grounders were readier than ever to say yes. No one could have foreseen what God had intended for this community and His intended reach into the suburb of Dunoon. God, in His wisdom and vision, was also moving various partners together over the years to form a new merger called the Zanakanyo Network, to be even more effective at educating and finding employment through various job readiness access points and mobile training across 7 communities. We could never have guessed that through these moments of saying yes to God, He still had more in store for us. In 2016, the Western Cape Education Department approached Common Good to be part of a new model of education to effect change and good governance from within the school. We started in Oranjecloof Primary School and have since, in 2018, started in Dyser Primary and Silicumba High School. Who could have guessed what God had in mind when we first said that small yes in 2008? In 2017, the inner city congregation felt God's call to a new site to create another meeting in Sea Point. They had no idea of the community waiting to meet God through this act of obedience and generosity. God has been on the move all along. We've realized over the past year that as we've said yes to everyday acts of obedience and compassion, that we were walking into His plans for us. As we look at the threads throughout our history, we've been able to say a louder and a more clarified yes to the vision that He has for us. And that's to be a community that gives 5 gifts to the city. We remember the account of the boy bringing all he had to Jesus. In his case, it was 5 loaves and 2 fish, and Jesus took that and multiplied it to feed thousands. We have a deep conviction that when we take to Jesus what we have for His plans and purposes, He multiplies it in ways that we can't even imagine. And looking back over the decades, we see that Jesus has multiplied these small yeses to be part of His big plan. Who knows what the next 20 years will hold in His hands? The local church is the hope of the world. Our story is one of a series of small yeses all flowing together in the great work of God in our city. The best gift that we can give Cape Town is to see more congregations being planted, to disciple more people to say yes. To say yes to multiplying Christ followers, yes to planting new congregations, yes to compassion and justice, yes to renewing our culture, and yes to strengthening new churches. And we want to keep saying yes for the next 100 years. What are you saying yes to today?